working on a 2011 Audi A4 with the 2.0 turbo, and we're doing a transmission fill. We did a flush and fill, but we needed to add some more. So I just want to go over the step-by-steps of how we make that happen, and we'll go over the details as we go. So here's the correct Audi fluid. And this is the Audi OEM transmission filter. Alright, so currently we've got the back end on 2 jack stands, the front tires on a ramp. This was on a ramp, but we moved it over to a jack stand because we need room to use the pump under the car to fill the transmission fluid. So it's kind of janky, just understand that you've got to have it off the ground and it's got to be level to do this. Alright, so make sure the engine's basically cooled off when you start, but you're going to come down here and you're going to have to disconnect some wiring harnesses, get them out of the way, and this harness adapter right here actually is held in by the engine transmission mount plug, so that has to come off, and that was a 19 mil 12 point. Yep. Alright, so we just disconnected the wire harness from the bracket, and then we're going to take the 19 mil from the back and just loosen it up. Once you get it loosened up, you can just move it by hand like Gavin is here, and then it'll just come all the way out. So this is the entire length of the bolt and the bracket once you get it taken out. Alright, once that bracket's out of the way, you can move these wires and you can see the transmission filter housing right down there. And we're going to take those off, and that's a, was it a T30?
Correct.
Yeah, T30. And then we've got, it looks like a 12 mil, we'll verify. Take that off. Alright, so this bolt right here is a 13 mil, and it holds in the oil feed, or the transmission feed lines. So we'll probably lose a little bit when we pull this up, but this has to come out to get the transmission filter out. Alright, so the bolt's out, and we're going to try to pull that line off. It's in there with a couple of O-rings, and then it pulls out. Alright, so he's taken off the bottom T30 on the transmission mount for the filter housing. Now these are aluminum screws. As we found out last time, an over torque will just break this right off. So this is literally a few inch-pounds basically. I don't know what the spec is, but it can't be more than like 30 inch-pounds or something. I don't know. So be careful not to break those off. Alright, now we're going to pop that transmission filter out. Just move the lines to the side, pull up on it, get a little pop out of it, and then just bring it up. Alright, so this is it out. As far as we know, it's never been changed before, so I mean there's nothing wrong with this as far as appearance goes. It's just that you should replace these, you know, every now and again. So here it is. Alright, so if you just want to see what it looks like down here, you can see into the guts of the transmission a little bit. And you can actually put fluid in here if you just needed to put some fluid in here in case you lost some, but this is not the proper fill location. We'll show you that in a little while. So this new one, it's got a rubber seal built into it right here. So this is the gasket. Don't put anything else around it. Alright, so he's pushing it back in, just setting it back in the hole where it goes. And then he's going to align the transmission lines back into the filter and then just tighten it back down. Alright, so we'll just show you the next steps after this. Alright, so in case you need to order these yourself, let's see if I can, here, hang on.
Go on.
Alright, so the thread length is 16 millimeter, and then the overall length is 21 millimeter, and then the thread diameter width is, I better zero that out and start over. I think that's off. 5.84. So if you need to order new ones, there you go. Alright, so this is the transmission feed lines going into the transmission filter housing, and that's the picture of the O-ring that goes in there. There's two O-rings because there's two lines, but that's just one of them what they look like. All right, so a good note here. This is that 13 or 12 mil. What size? 13 mil?
13.
Yeah, the 13 millimeter bolt that held these two transmission lines in to the filter housing. This is just one of those brass fittings that are pressed into the plastic. So if you over torque it, that's just going to start spinning, and then you're screwed. So don't over tighten. All right, we're going to move on to the next step, and I'm going to show you a few things because we're not going to show you on the car. But it's recommended to have a pick tool, and there's two different types of filler necks that are underneath the car. I'll show you underneath the car in a second. But there's this long swooping type. Looks like that when it goes into the filler neck. And then there's this shorter piece, which is the one that we have, is a shorter one. Looks like this, and there's an O-ring at the top. And we just use a pick tool and you pull it out. Now we're not going to do this part because we did this previously to drain it out. So if you're doing this for the first time, what you'll do initially is you will pull this out and let all the fluid drain out. So we've already done that. The thing's back in it, and we've put some transmission fluid back in it, but now we're going to do the rest of the procedure following it through. So real quick, it's saying to start with 5.5 to 6 liters of ATF into the transmission. So again, if you've drained it, you're starting over, this is the quantity to start with. All right, so we're underneath the car, and here you go. So here's the oil pan for the engine, and then there's the transmission, and then that crossbar, and then there's the transmission plug directly on the bottom of the transmission. And we're going to use a TP55. Actually had it for a Ford head bolt, I think, but it fits pretty well in here. There is a different size that's required, but that TP55 fits better than a T55 regular, because there's a special one that goes to this. I just don't have it, so this is what we're using. Okay, so if you guys were doing this from scratch, then you would have put fluid into the transmission using a fluid pump of some sort. I'll show you mine. So just a regular hand pump, and we'll do this in a minute, but that's how you fill it initially. So once you do that, you gotta follow these directions. Let the engine run approximately 2,500 RPM immediately after starting it. Running the engine at high speeds is necessary to bleed the ATF pump. So you can just read on through here. So start the engine with selector and park. Using accelerated pedal, let the engine run briefly at 2,500 RPM. Press brake and move selector alternately between reverse and drive. Let idle 2 seconds in each position. Perform the procedure 3 times and then go to the next step. Alright, side note. You have to have a way to read temperature, the transmission temperature. It's an important piece of making this happen. This is a bidirectional scan tool. This is a scan tool that I use just for quick access. This one for this Audi was not able to read transmission fluid temperature. This one is. So if you don't have a way to read temperature, you shouldn't do this. Now we're going to start it up and then rev it to 2,500 RPMs. Alright, let off, and then we're going to move it with foot on the brake, parking brake on. We're going to from reverse, 2 seconds, to drive, 2 seconds, back to reverse, drive, reverse, drive. So that was the 3 times, 2 seconds in between. Foot still on the brake, go back into park. We're going to run through each gear, leaving it in that gear for about 2 seconds. Back to park. Alright, ATF level is correct if a little bit of fluid still escapes at the ATF check plug between 95 and 113 degrees Fahrenheit. That's because transmission fluid expands when it gets hot. Right now I'm at 100 degrees, so we need to go pull that plug and see, well, because a little bit's going to come out because it gets inside that fill plug. But then after that, we'll see where it's at. Alright, so the car's running. It's right. It was right at 100 degrees. We're going to pull the plug, and there should be a little bit that comes out automatically because it's in that little fill plug. Yep, there we go. That's what they were talking about. Approximately 5 to 10 milliliters of fluid will always drain initially from the internal oil level pipe when the plug is unscrewed, which is what we just did. So then it's saying to install the gearbox filler system, which we're going to use the hand pump to stick up in there and then start pumping. Alright, quick update. I showed you the wrong pump initially. You can use the other one, but we had the wrong size hose. So we're going to use this style of a pumping, which goes on to a quart or a gallon or whatever, different threads. And there's this kit we ordered it from Amazon. It's got various Volkswagen, Audi, maybe BMW parts, because these have to get attached to the transmission filler. So this piece screws up into the transmission underneath, and then this little check valve thing here connects onto that, and then the pump hose screws onto that. So we'll show you what it looks like in a second. Alright, so as a completed unit, you got this little swivel valve here for your check valve, and then this is just an open item, which is why I use to shut this off and on with, but you can leave this in the transmission to disconnect when you do a fluid check fill. Alright, so this particular attachment you would have had if you had filled it earlier. We skipped that showing it, so this will be one of the first things you do when you start it, or start the process. So we got the attachment piece hooked up. A little bit of a dribble is just fine right now, and we're going to connect the quick connect fitting, and that way we can get the transmission fluid connected in there. Alright, so we're going to pump in a quart of the transmission fluid, and then we'll come back. Hey, just so you can see it, I mean, this thing takes like 150 pumps or something to get through this quart, so be patient as you go. Alright, so most of that quart's in there. We shut the ball valve off, and I'm going to go up and start the car and let it start to process that fluid, and then we'll come back down. Alright, so the car's running again. Current temperature 98 degrees, so we've got some wiggle room, because everything you're doing has to be done before 113 degrees, because then what it does, it expands too much and it's going to over pour. So we're going to run it back through the gears again, you know, park, reverse, neutral drive, all that stuff you saw earlier. Alright, so we're back at this step. At 95 degrees, the ATF must flow out continually and at first strongly. Wait until just a little ATF is coming out and then tighten the plug back. Currently, we are at 100 degrees, so we're right within our range. Now we're going to disconnect the quick connect. Alright, so we're going to disconnect the quick connect, tap for fluid. Alright, so strongly at first, like it said it should. Now we put that about that entire quart in there, but we didn't know how low it was, so it may have some come out. Some extra come out. Yours may not, depending on how much fluid's actually in it. And it says wait till just a little is coming out, and then we want to tighten down the new plug. But that's a pretty continual flow. That's not just a little necessarily. So we want to make sure we're not driving around over full. You see it start to sprinkle a little bit. It means we're getting to the right place. And it's only 102 degrees, so we're doing okay there. Alright, so we've got just a little trickle coming out, so we're going to go ahead and take off our quick connect plug, and we'll put our actual transmission plug back in. Alright, so the transmission plug's going back in, and we'll tighten it down. Don't know what the torque spec is on this, but just like any oil bolt, We're just keeping fluid in so it doesn't need to be cranked on. Alright, so that's done, and then it says here the ATF check plug must be installed again before the ATF reaches 113 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's warmer than that, it'll leak out the transmission and not have enough ATF because it's expanding. If at 104 degrees Fahrenheit, no ATF or just a few drops flow out, go back to ATF filling process, which is what we just did. Alright, so just to wrap it up, the initial drain we didn't have to do, but if you did, you simply just pull the drain plug from underneath the transmission, and then you pull out that little hose, that little pipe I showed you in the initial thing with the pick tool. That's going to let all the fluid come out. Because whether you have the short installation pipe or the long one, that is how the transmission gauges the level depending on the temperature of the transmission, and that's how you get your correct fill level. So other than that, I hope this process helps you out. I haven't seen much around there. Let me know if you know anything else to share with the group. Thanks.